I'm going to make a Dundee cake. I'm preparing the pan. It is a Scottish fruit cake, so I hope that doesn't immediately turn a lot of people off. It's very popular to say, oh, I don't eat fruitcake, I don't like fruitcake. I've never understood why, because I love fruitcake. This recipe makes just one cake, and as you can see, I'm using a springform pan. There are many recipes online for Dundee cake, and I don't know which one is considered to be the original. I suspect the one that has probably the least ingredients in it, but anyway, I have selected one that I like, and that's what I'm using. Oh, knock you all over the place here. I'm going to line the bottom of the pan with parchment paper, and I have cut the parchment paper a little larger than the pan. Makes it easier to get the bottom off of the fruit cake, the bottom of the pan off the fruit cake after you have finished baking it. Sides will release quite easily in a springform pan, but it might stick to the bottom if you're not careful. And grease the paper after you put the paper in. The brush stuck to it and pull it back off the wall isn't good. Well, I think that will do for preparing the pan. Let's see if we can't get some progress on making the cake. Start by preparing the fruit for the fruit cake. And I think basically you can use any kind of dried or candied fruit that you prefer, but keeping it within these proportions. Well, a little less wouldn't matter, but if you had a lot more, the cake would probably fall apart. Anyway, it calls for a cup of raisins and a cup of dried currants, and I used both of those. And then 1/3 of a cup of diced candied mixed fruit peel. I only used the candied orange peel, because I like there's a lot of orange in this, but I like the orange flavoring in it. And 1/3 of a cup of candied cherries, quartered. I used maraschino cherries, not the candied cherries. When I went to buy fruit for this, I had to buy quite a large container of the candied cherries, and I really didn't have use for them, so I'm using maraschino cherries. And 2 tablespoons of grated orange zest, and I grate that with one of these things here. Grating plane, or I guess it was originally a woodworking tool. And this you dredge with 1/3 of a cup of just all-purpose flour. And the reason for that, if it is each individual thing in there is covered with some flour, it will stay suspended in the fruit cake rather than all sinking to the bottom. That's the theory anyway. I take mine out of the pan, it's all sunk to the bottom. The theory didn't work. Now, usually in the past when I've done this dredging, it really does make a difference. So, there's the fruit prepared. We'll move on to making the cake batter. First thing we have to do is cream the butter and the sugar together. And it's 1 cup of butter, which is 1/2 pound of butter. If you're using stick butter, it's 2 sticks. I'm using an unsalted butter. The recipe didn't specify, but I'm using an unsalted butter, so I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt to the recipe. If I don't knock you on the floor, that is in the meantime. I'll add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt when I put the flour mixture in. That's room temperature butter. Still seems to be a bit on the hard side, I guess. Yeah, that's a little better. And that's just 1 cup of white sugar. And we'll let that cream until it's smooth and a lighter yellow color, bring you back at that point. Well, I think that has creamed enough. It's light and fluffy and a light yellow color. Now you add 4 large eggs, one at a time. Already got 4 in the bowl, so if I'll be able to get one at a time in there or not remains to be seen. Well, I think that's thoroughly combined. Still got a little butter sticking to the paddles here. Next you add 1 ounce of ground almonds. The top of this is going to be decorated with sliced almonds, toasted sliced almonds or slightly toasted. All I did to get an ounce of ground almonds was use my food processor and grind an ounce of the sliced almonds rather than buying a package of ground almonds that I wouldn't have any great use for. 1 2/3 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and I have added, as I said, a ½ teaspoon of salt because I used unsalted butter. And this just gets folded in. Now we add the fruit. Now the fruit that has been dredged in the flour. Really don't want to do a lot of mixing at this stage, just enough to combine the fruit into the rest of the mixture here, and may have to do part of it by hand. Seems to be doing a fairly good job, but I imagine when I take it out of the thing I will still combine it a bit by hand. As you can see, it's a light colored fruit cake. Dark fruit cakes have a lot of spice in them, sometimes chocolate, cocoa, and sometimes molasses or whatever, which makes them a very dark fruit cake. This is a light in color and very tasty. I don't think I have said so far, I've been meaning to say, I started making this many years ago after reading an article. Supposedly this is the Queen's favorite fruitcake or favorite cake, and whenever she travels anywhere, the palace makes up one of these and it goes with her in a tin. So, good enough for the Queen, good enough for me. Get this in the pan. Well, I didn't really do any additional mixing, I guess. Sort of scraped it down from the sides. It's a very heavy batter, of course, most fruit cakes are. Try to get this pushed down into the pan, I guess. Got an offset spatula there I was going to use, but I think this is a bit too dense for that. Use the same spatula that I used making it. Okay. Now this gets baked in a 325-degree oven, which is a real moderate oven. With the sugar and things, and it won't burn, I guess. For an hour and a half, or thereabouts. Start testing it till the cake tester comes out clean. Go to the middle. I think I have that pretty much even. We'll put it in and see what it looks like in an hour and a half time. Fresh out of the oven, and for this cake, instead of the hour and a half, it only went an hour and 15 minutes. And I guess the last 15 minutes or so, I put a piece of parchment paper over the top because it was getting kind of dark. What I'm doing now is painting the top of it with corn syrup as quickly as possible while it's still hot. That's so the almonds will adhere to the top, and as it cools it will absorb the corn syrup. It won't have a sticky top. Traditionally it is covered with, or in a pattern, with whole almonds. I tried several locations and I couldn't find whole almonds, so I went with slivered almonds. And they have been toasted just for 5 minutes in a 350-degree oven. Since they're slivered, there isn't any way of doing a pattern. I'm just going to put them on and hope they stick, I guess. I haven't even released the sides of the springform pan yet, but I'll be doing that next. So I'll bring you back after I've taken the sides off it. Well, I've removed the sides of the springform pan, and now I hope you see what I mean by having a little extra parchment paper. I've peeled that down away from the edges of the cake because as it cools it'll be more difficult to do. But I won't attempt to remove the cake from the bottom of the springform pan until it has completely cooled. So once it is cooled, we'll remove that and get it on a plate and come back. We'll try it with a cup of tea. Just barely cooled, but still a little bit warm maybe. I can't wait any longer. Just got to try it. Came out of the off the bottom with that parchment paper thing there. It came off very easily. This over. Maybe I turn it on the side to get a better look at it, I guess. Excuse me for knocking you all around. It's quite soft. See some of the maraschino cherries there. And it's every bit as good as I remembered it being. No wonder the Queen likes this stuff. Well, that is Dundee Cake. And even if you don't care for fruitcake, I'd suggest you give it a try. It's a light cake, so it's not like the dark cakes at all. Very nice flavor. I can taste the orange all through it. I'll get this video up. Thank you very much for watching.